Hello and a very, very warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry by Humor. This is both our 37th mini-episode and the final part to our series on helping you and your organization implement a successful IoT solution. Many thanks for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, first, welcome aboard. And second, check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsMadeSimple.com, which has an incredible abundance of material on IoT. If you enjoyed this podcast, we ask two things. Subscribe to it using your favorite podcast service, and if that podcast service allows you to leave a comment or a review, kindly do so. To recap the first three parts of this series quickly, in the first part, we covered the benefits of doing an honest assessment of your business at the start of a solution. In the second, we walked through a number of things that you need to consider when choosing the ideal solution. And last episode, the third part, we covered some key pointers to ensure that your solution is implemented smoothly. The final episode, we're going to look at the solution in action. We're going to cover things that you need to know to keep things running smooth and to plan for any future changes or upgrades. We'll kick things off by talking about something that might have been part of part 3, actually. The first thing we're going to talk about is why and how you should implement some key security processes. In the second and third parts of this series, we spoke about some of the things that you need to ask your solution provider about the security of their offering. Here we're talking more about locking down devices, and in a minute, whom you should allow to make changes to your devices. Many devices allow for different security settings to prevent unwanted changes. This usually means things like they use a password, which ideally is different for each device, and some of them use something called an access control list. This is not really that nerdy, it just sounds a bit nerdy, as it really means that you restrict where somebody needs to be to make changes to your device. So as an example, you can restrict it so that changes can only come from inside your office to your remote devices. Finally, while you might have wanted to think about this earlier, now is a good time to ensure that you're encrypting all data being sent to and from your device. Point number 2 has to do with who can make changes. This depends a lot on the structure and size of your organization. If there's just a couple of employees or even just you may want to restrict the ability to make changes to 1 or even 2 people. In a much larger organization, you're going to have to decide this and put in controls to make sure that access is taken away from somebody when they leave your organization. You may also want to put in a hierarchy as to performing mass changes. So if a setting has to be changed across hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of devices, you may want to have a process that your executives have to sign off on that kind of a decision. The third part, or point number 3, has to do with reporting and notifications. A big part of you might say, I want to know everything. I put in this freaking IT solution to know exactly what's going on with my organization. You know what? Be careful what you wish for. Many of us have started out thinking that way, but when you get 30 updates in the first 2 minutes as to what's going on, you might decide, yeah, that's a bit too much data. You need to determine a pecking order early on for your information. What do you need to know about immediately? Maybe it's that a key piece of machinery is down, or maybe that an alarm is going off. That you get immediately sent to you. What do you want to see in a daily report? Perhaps you want to know your adherence level to your delivery schedules, and what are you okay with on a weekly report, for instance, and what can you look up on demand? Getting the right amount of data ensures these solutions help you, not get in the way. In part number 5, we're going to talk about the necessity of doing each update that comes out. But here in part number 4, we're going to talk about how are you planning to update each device when a new software or setting is required. Many solutions offer something called OTA, or over-the-air updates. The update is sent to a remote device, it's applied, and the device usually reboots and is back into service in a few minutes. If your solution has this capability, it makes updates much easier. However, you need to ensure that your devices are not going down and doing this, even for a couple of minutes, during a vital time for your organization. 2 a.m. might sound ideal for all businesses, but perhaps downtime is not great at that time for a bar or a nightclub, as an example. If your device does not allow for over-the-air updates, you want to have some kind of a schedule to do the updates, often corresponding with other updates, like the oil change on your vehicle. As I alluded to, point number 5 covers whether you really need to do each update at all. Every manufacturer is going to tell you that you have to do each one, and they're going to bug you and push you to do so. And if there's minimal work involved, you might want to consider it. However, if doing an update, especially to a large number of devices, is cumbersome, you may want to skip some here and there, especially if things are running fine. Many updates are there to add features that you may not want to use. The only exception here is if the software update involves a major security flaw fix, and in that case, I think of it as a bit more mandatory. The last thing to consider here is how fast you do an update after it becomes available. Most consumers dive and rush out to do the latest iPhone or Android update, but most corporations are not nearly that fast in their moving forward. It may be a good idea for you to test the new software on just a couple of devices, especially if you have a large fleet out there. Now that you've made it through some of the things that you need to do to keep your things running, let's talk about shiny new stuff. Point number 6 is about deciding when it's time to upgrade your hardware. If your solution is a turnkey one, updated hardware may just be given to you by the solution provider as a way to enhance their service. In some cases, the update may be to add capability, or perhaps the device is no longer being supported. However, if you're in charge of the hardware upgrade cycle, when should you do it? We mentioned how consumers are fast to update their hardware, but corporations tend to move slower, trying to get every last little morsel out of a purchase. As long as things are running well, there may not be a point to upgrade. So a few things you want to consider. Is the device customer-facing? One sign to upgrade might be if the device looks old or is outdated, as this can badly reflect on your organization. If the device is too slow or is incapable of running programs that you want to run, this may be a sign that an upgrade is in order. Finally, if the reliability of the device is hurting your productivity, it's often a good reason to change it out. The final point we're going to cover today is point number 7, and this has to do with upgrades, but instead it's should you upgrade to a faster cellular network? Often when you're updating your device, if you change out your hardware, you may be upgrading to a faster cellular network as well, so this might be taken care of. However, many devices allow the capability of upgrading the network component only. The obvious thought to a new network is that it's faster, but there may be other things that are improved that you may want to consider. Many of the networks will lower down their latency. Okay, nerd alert here. To keep it simple, latency is the time it takes for a piece of information to make a round trip around the network. This may help to increase your performance and the security of some of your applications. The other thing that many networks do is reduce their power consumption. This means that you may have to charge your devices less, or in some cases, you may be able to reduce the size of the device. Depending on what you're doing, this may be important. In the final segment, we're going to wrap up this 4-part series. Congrats on making it this far in the series. I do really hope you found it useful. To wrap things up, here's a couple things to remember. First, IoT, as I've said many times and will always say, is about information. So it's going to make things safer, more productive, and lower down your costs. Make sure that any solution you choose does those things. Otherwise, don't do it. Next, remember you get what you pay for in many things in life. Look at the entire cost of ownership, say for a 10-year period, when you compare devices and solutions. Finally, you need to focus on what you do for a living. If you have time to take on some of the work implementation of this solution, then by all means do so. If not, farm it all out to a turnkey provider. Many thanks for listening to this podcast. As always, we'd love to hear from you, good, bad, and ugly. First place to start is our Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple, which has some great material on IoT. If I'm personally connected to you on LinkedIn, drop me a note through that service. And if we're personally connected via old-fashioned ways like email or text, yeah, I guess people still use those. Drop me one of those. Thanks again. I'm Larry by Humor. Take care.